10 millimeter versus 44 Magnum in revolvers. And what we have today is our double tap hard cast ammunition. Our 10 millimeter is a 230 grain hard cast solid. So that's a very, very heavy bullet for caliber. That is rated at 1120 feet per second through a 5-inch barrel. And then our 44 Magnum is a 240 grain hard cast solid. That's more of a semi-wad cutter, as where this is more of a flat point. And our 44 Magnum is rated at 1455 feet per second through a 7.5-inch barrel. I'm going to use my 4-inch barrel revolvers today, my Smith & Wesson Model 610 for the 10 millimeter and my Smith & Wesson Model 69 for the 44 Magnum. So 230 grain, I'd feel hard pressed to find somebody that could run something like that in a 10 millimeter semi-automatic pistol. So that's kind of the perfect use out of this particular revolver, to run loads like that might not run out of a semi-automatic pistol. So this should be a very interesting test. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test, but this is my big dangerous animal ballistic test. So basically I've taken my normal real world simulation and I've doubled everything here. Normally I do like 4 layers of fabric, 3 inches of clear ballistics, a 1/4 inch MDF, and so on. Now I've got 8 layers of fabric, followed by 6 inches of clear ballistics, followed by a 1/2 inch medium density fiberboard, followed by 32 more inches of clear ballistics, another 1/2 inch medium density fiberboard, another 16 inches of clear ballistics, and then my old needing to be improved fleece bullet stop as a backup in case these go all the way through. So this is basically a double representation of the thickness of a human, and clear ballistics is half the density of flesh. So anything you see in here, basically it'll go about half that far in an actual living creature. And after I do my ballistic gel test, I am going to shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 44 Magnum 240 grain. This is rated at 1420 feet per second through a 7.5 inch barrel. So obviously I'm not going to get anywhere close to that and my little 4 1/4 inch Model 69, but let's see what we get with this 240 grain load through this 4 1/4 inch barrel here. $12.37. $12.31. $11.82, $11.71, $11.63. So we started to get some loss of velocity there, so that's interesting. Now our 10 millimeter, this is the perfect load just because you tend to not really get a lot of gas loss from the cylinder gap if the bullet is real long. So it's rated at 1120 feet per second through a 5-inch barrel. The amount of barrel travel in this gun is actually from throughout the cylinder and out the muzzle is over 5 inches. So let's see how close we get to 1120 feet per second in this revolver. $11.14, and a little bit of stickiness on this moon clip, I think. $11.16. Yeah, I'm having trouble with this particular ammo and this particular revolver, where it's wanting to stick. I'll be back in a minute. Alright, so I removed the moon clip and I've loaded them individually. I have noticed that when I was loading those on the moon clip, they seemed like they stuck on those moon clips a lot harder than typical. So it's like that brass might be a little bit out of spec or something, but it rotates without that moon clip in place. So I'll keep going here. $11.07. So yeah, another problem there. I normally have no problems with this revolver. $11.11. $11.16. So while it's got good power, for whatever reason this brass is just not quite right in this particular revolver. It's really odd. Like I got one in here that I didn't even fire yet, and it's sitting where it's supposed to sit, but the rest of them are backed out really far. So this brass is kind of out of spec. That's interesting. So let's hit our ballistic gel block and see how these compare. All right, a big dangerous animal simulation test here. We have 8 layers of sweatshirt material, followed by 6 inches of clear ballistics, followed by a 1/2 inch medium density fiberboard, followed by 32 inches of clear ballistics, followed by another 1/2 inch medium density fiberboard, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and then my blanket bullet stop on the back. So I'm going to fire a couple shots of each cartridge and then go take a look. So I'm just going to do a 44 mag and then go take a look and then repeat that with the 10 millimeter. So 44 mag, let's see how this does. One shot, and we'll do another. Let's take a look. All right, so relatively consistent performance. A whole lot of damage going on in here. That first shot, the bullet is backwards. The second shot, it is facing forward, and you see more damage down there with that first shot that's facing backwards, which could indicate it did start to tumble a little bit around here. So not bad overall performance for what I'm seeing. Pretty consistent for what it is. So with our first shot there, we got a penetration of, it's hard to see from this parallax, but it's right around 27 inches. And then our next one is, I'm gonna say about 26 inches. So quite a bit of penetration, but I've seen a lot more before with different cartridges. So interesting. Let's hit that with our 10 millimeter now. All right, 10 millimeter auto. Let's see how this does. Lot less recoil there. Do another one. Well, I'm having that problem again with this brass. It's very, very sticky. Don't know why. One more. Let's go take a look. All right, so that's interesting performance there. The second one really tumbled down. Now, what I can say here, the thing that stands out the most out of all of this is just that super low recoil. So it does look like with that one that curved down, it is kind of keyholing through a little bit more than the bottom one. It's hard to say with the 44 mag, but they're straight enough to get okay penetration. The thing that stands out though is quite literally half the recoil with the 10 millimeter. Half the recoil, maybe even less than half, and we're getting pretty close to the same penetration. Now, I'm not saying that would be just as effective as the 44 mag, because the 44 mag is a bigger bullet. It's going to cut a bigger hole. So even if they went to the same depths, the 44 mag would still do better. But what I am saying is, you know, for the recoil, the 10 millimeter is doing really, really well. So our first 10 millimeter actually went almost as far as that second 44 mag. I'm gonna say about 25 3/4 inches. And with our next 10 millimeter, we went right to about 23 1/4 inches. So, you know, interesting here. Not the best performance I've seen, but the 10 millimeter for what it is doing pretty well, except for the fact it's not wanting to run. So here's that thing. it's not going to run probably in most semi-automatic pistols. And now with whatever's wrong with this brass, it's not going to want to run in my revolver either. So just interesting overall. So out of both of these, out of revolvers, I'm going to have to pick the 44 Magnum, even though its recoil is pretty brutal and it's hard to shoot because it actually functioned. As we're in a revolver, this 10mm is just not working out. You know, I fire a lot of 10mm through this revolver and I don't have any problems, but for whatever reason something's up with this. So let me shoot the steel target and see what kind of practical accuracy I get with these. But first, let's pull these out of the block and take a closer look at these bullets. All right, so here's a closer look at these bullets. Here's our 10mm and here's our 44 Magnums. There's a 10mm. That's weird. The base of that has a big old dent in it. I don't know why that is. There's our 44s. Now, one thing that stands out right away is it looks like the base of these bullets are narrower than the nose. And another interesting thing is when I knocked out some of these rounds that wouldn't rotate, I noticed that they had marks all the way around them, like those bullets are too wide. And if I look at the case there, I mean, that looks like it's bulged. Like that bullet is too big. So it's almost like the bullet is, you know, too big. Once they press it in that case, yeah, it's gonna be closer to that right diameter, but something's a little off there. This one especially, you can see it where it's very narrow at the base and then it balloons out. So that's interesting. It's very, very interesting. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 75 yards from the target. So this is just kind of our hunting simulation here. I wanted to go up closer and, you know, test these in double action as, you know, dangerous animal defense rounds, but because I can never get a fair comparison with this 10mm, I'm just going to fire single action at the steel from 75 yards to see how they shoot. And I did notice that, like, either the brass is really out of spec or the bullets are out of spec, because I had to cram them down in here without a moon clip in order to get the cylinder to rotate. And that might even change after I start firing and get some expansion of those cases and whatnot. So let's see what I can do here. I'm just going to fire 6 rounds of our 10mm from 75 yards. Just kind of see how they shoot for me. So 10mm auto. Yep. I can't barely cock that hammer. They do hit hard. All right, so I've had enough of that. I'm gonna have to pop that open later. Pull out those rounds. I'm not firing anymore. So 44 mag. Let's see how this does for me. So those are hard to shoot. I'm not really sure where they're going. I'll keep going here. And this is real sticky brass too. Normally I don't have this much problem getting them in there, so I don't know what's up with that. I'm not sure where these are going. I'm guessing high, maybe. Aim a little low. what's up with that. I'm not the greatest shot in the world, and while it did have a lot of recoil, I wasn't really noticing a whole lot of flinching. So I don't have a clue where most of those went. So again, I did a test a couple weeks ago with Doubletap 357 Magnum versus 357 Sig, and I had the same results where one of the two I was comparing is really early off and really weird. Where something's not right. And with this, again, something's not right. And I know most people are going to chalk it up to the revolver, but listen to me. When you run round after round after round after round after round, dozens of different ammo types with the moon clips, without the moon clips, I don't have any problems. And then you pick one ammo and it's doing this, you don't start looking at the revolver and be like, I wonder what's wrong with that. Because I get that all the time. No, there's something weird about this ammo, at least in this revolver. And with the 44 Magnum, that was a pretty good round. It wasn't really, it was kind of less powerful than a lot of rounds that I've tested. So not great energy there, but it did okay. It did pretty average for a 44 Magnum, but you know, I've seen a lot of companies do a lot better, where I've basically penetrated through the entire setup and get like halfway through that last block after going through more. So just kind of mediocre performance with these overall, and weird performance with the 10mm. So, interesting test. That's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.